Since the beginning of the war in Ukraine, Russia has lost about 370 aircraft and 331 helicopters. But this number is now up 335 after real live footage reveals how the Ukrainian HIMARS just annihilated 4 Russian helicopters. Just as Russian President Vladimir Putin became more comfortable with aircraft in the sky, Ukraine just taught him a valuable lesson. Send your helicopters, and we'll send our rockets. With the war ongoing and potential peace agreements in the works, it should come as no surprise that both Russia and Ukraine are taking more risks. Having more territory means more leverage at the negotiation table. On March 24th, Ukraine did something unbelievable. In a statement released by the Ukrainian Special Operations Forces, it was confirmed that 4 Russian helicopters had met their end at the hands of the HIMARS missile system. The helicopters, well, 2 of them were the Kamov Ka-52 Black Shark choppers with another pair of Mi-8s that were lingering in a support role. The helicopters were used around a Russian military site in the Belgorod Oblast. Its aim, to launch surprise attacks on unsuspecting Ukrainian soldiers. What's even more surprising is looking at this military site located in Belgorod. Not only does it lie deep in Russian territory, but it is also heavily camouflaged, often making it impossible for Ukrainian radar to pick up. It begs the question, how did Ukrainian special forces even know about this place? Was it leaked information, special reconnaissance, or simply luck? These are questions the Kremlin currently needs to answer. Moreover, this strike dents the Russian aerial offense, and without knowing how it happened, the Kremlin might not be willing to continue aerial assaults. Such a decision will greatly benefit Ukraine, perhaps even turning the tide of war in its favor. But you might also be wondering how this happened, and it is not hard to figure out. Before we continue, make sure you are subscribed for your daily military report. Since the start of the war, Western allies have been providing Ukraine with various weapons packages. All this comes at a cost, but it significantly increases Ukrainian capabilities. The High Mobility Artillery Rocket System, or HIMARS, is a highly effective, light rocket launcher, on wheels to be more exact. Mounted on the M1140 truck frame, these vehicles can easily reach a speed of 50 miles per hour, meaning it can quickly move around on the battlefield, even being used directly on the Russia-Ukraine border. In fact, Ukraine has already been receiving these HIMARS systems for the better part of the last 3 years. It was one of the first aid packages sent under the Biden administration. But despite the 20 initial HIMARS sent to Ukraine, it is estimated that another 18 were delivered in 2023-24. This brought its overall total to 38, which meant that Ukraine could evenly distribute them across the battlefield, rendering Russian air superiority to nothing but a fantasy. But what's even more impressive is that these systems not only target aerial threats, they can be redesignated, focusing on ground targets like tanks and armored vehicles as well. It has certainly given Ukraine one hell of an advantage on the battlefield. What's even more impressive is the fact that it has an MLRS, or M270 multiple launch rocket system attached at the back, with a capacity to carry 3 crew members. The HIMARS system that adds to this is the real kicker, and it transforms the stationary rocket system into an unpredictable beast that can be set up anywhere on the battlefield. It doesn't sound like much of an advantage, right? Well, Russian detection radar kind of struggles in detecting these systems. So, Ukraine has a portable rocket system that can easily move between various points on the battlefield, all while being virtually undetectable. This is where the true advantages come into play. When you don't know where your enemy is, it is risky to attack, something that has helped Ukraine in its counteroffensive around Kursk specifically. It is basically this technique which Ukraine favors and seems to be the approach taken by this specific HIMARS unit. In layman's terms, Ukraine set up the system, fired into Belgorod to down these helicopters, then retreated. In less than 30 minutes, the area was vacated, and Russia didn't even know what hit it. But before we move on, it is also essential to talk about the Fire Control System, or FCS for short. Without this system in place, the HIMARS would be hard to control, and in a battlefield situation where casualties become a reality, it could spell disaster. Fortunately, the FCS allows the HIMARS to be operated by just a single person. Yes, should 2 people be taken out of the 3-man crew, the remaining soldier can continue using the HIMARS. By reverting to the keyboard control, with a gigabyte of storage and advanced GPS, it can still load and unload without the operator even getting out of the truck. This versatility has made it one of the key additions to the battlefield, where Ukraine seems to have eradicated Russian air control. So, what does it fire exactly? Well, the standard spec fires traditional M270 MLRS rockets. These standard surface-to-air shells can easily down virtually any threat the HIMARS might face. However, more impressive is the fact that it also shoots the ATAC-MS missiles. Now, if you cast your mind back to 2023, the whole world was abuzz, focusing specifically on these new missiles. The traditional M26 rocket can reach about 20 miles in range. Add to this the extended variant, and you have just under 50 miles. But with the ATACM, the whole game changes. Ukraine can essentially reach a target from almost 190 miles away. To put this into perspective, a HIMARS with ATAC-MS stationed in Kursk can easily reach Sudzha. These rockets have an operating range of around 186 miles. It is also these missiles that became a big talking point during the war, with Russia not only complaining about its deployment, but actively moving its troops. In early 2025, the Kyiv Independent reported the Russian military moved about 90% of all military equipment beyond this 190-mile range. To sum this up, Ukraine has a missile system that can target deep into Russia, but it is also portable and maneuverable while being operated by just 3 soldiers. Talk about efficiency on the battlefield. Finally, the HIMARS can travel up to 300 miles, which gives them enough juice to have some fun with Russia. It is for these exact reasons that Ukraine is still in this war, and there is no air superiority on the battlefield, but enough of the HIMARS. With plenty of video footage, it is far more interesting to look at how Russia pulled this off. First of all, the video begins with all 4 Russian helicopters on the screen. What is noticeable is the fact that they are so close together. This is probably one of the first mistakes Russia made. Why? Well, the HIMARS is a cunning unit. One of its secret capabilities is knowing how to fire cluster munitions. These missiles scatter when triggered, having a similar effect to a hand grenade. But instead of shrapnel, they are smaller bombs or bomblets. Each of them explodes individually, depending on where they land. So, having equipment, or even soldiers, all congregated in a single area is not a good idea. North Korean soldiers found this out quickly upon entering the war. Another question is how this footage was captured. Well, it is more than likely a first-person drone that was hovering above these choppers. Moments later, you can see an explosion, which is followed by 2 more. By looking closely, the HIMARS trail is even visible in the footage. The final chopper was down just moments later, clearly showing how powerful and impactful these HIMARS rockets can be. But what's even more surprising is that at this moment, there was nothing Russia could have done to stop it. Not even the highly praised S-400 anti-air defense system would be useful against the power of an American HIMARS. Moreover, these helicopters are not bad by any stretch of the imagination. The Ks-52 is one of the most reliable in the Russian fleet, and the Mi-8 is one of the most popular. It is perhaps the highest produced military chopper in the world. Both these have been battle-tested and have an array of features. This includes anti-missile systems, great maneuverability, and a 2A 42-30mm automatic gun. But they were no match for a single HIMARS unit. which absolutely devastated them before they could leave the airfield. What does this spell for the war moving forward? While the HIMARS is extremely effective, Ukraine might not have it for much longer. Yes, it currently boasts an impressive arsenal of these weapons, but they still rely on U.S. ammunition. Recently, President Donald Trump announced the pause of aid to Ukraine, which will significantly impact the current state of the battlefield. Ukraine has a large reserve of missiles and rockets for the HIMARS, but it should run out eventually. Moreover, HIMARS is the biggest problem. Removing them from the battlefield leads to bigger ramifications. But what do we mean? Well, as mentioned earlier, the introduction of the HIMARS forced Russia to move its military equipment beyond its range. Since Russia doesn't have any real threat that could do similar damage, it was a major boost to the front lines. Now, this advantage will slowly shrink, allowing more and more Russian equipment to make it back to battle lines. Should Russia manage to move more artillery toward the border, it brings Kiev back into the firing line. The move also means that Russia will have additional frontline support. But perhaps the biggest fear is air superiority. As mentioned, the HIMARS plays a big role in keeping Ukrainian airspace free of Russian fighters. Should Russia gain air dominance, it will almost certainly change the tide of the war, further increasing Ukrainian frontline losses. Now, there is one more major concern that will undoubtedly affect the Ukraine war. Even though Ukraine decisively destroyed the Mi-8 chopper, it has an evil cousin. This is called the Mi-8 TV. It is a variant of the parent helicopter, but it can function in a secondary capacity to lay minefields. Russia has been plugging up its front line by laying many of these minefields, which has seriously stunted Ukrainian counterattacks. Without the HIMARS system, it will further enable Russia to drop more mines from the sky instead of having active boots on the ground. With areas like Kursk being heavily contested, it poses an incredible risk. More mines mean that Russia can possibly encircle Ukraine and launch a devastating attack. To date, these U.S. systems have kept this in check, mostly forcing Russia to operate at night. This means minefields are often volatile, with not even Russia knowing where they are. Experts estimate that about 2 million mines have been laid, covering a whopping 40% of all Ukrainian territory. To dispose of these could take years, if not decades, without any U.S. assistance. Again, this proves exactly just how valuable of a partner the United States has been, and should the pause of aid to Ukraine persist, the damage will be unimaginable. But what is the Russian response to this unexpected attack? As of this video, there has been no word from the Kremlin. The Bulgarian military were the first to comment, suggesting that there are still many questions that need to be answered. They continue by suggesting that none of the choppers hit in the strikes were operational and mainly used in a supportive capacity. Meanwhile, the Kremlin is probably scrambling to find a decent excuse that would justify the loss of these aircraft. According to military analysts, a closer look at the video suggests that only one helicopter was a direct hit, with the others mainly suffering repairable damage. The silence from the Kremlin further raises questions. Since the start of the war, Russian media has been extremely vocal whenever an asset is hit in Russian territory. This follows various threats from President Putin, which suggest that Russia is ready for nuclear action. The Kremlin recently changed its protocol surrounding the use of nuclear weapons, opening the possibility for its use if a target is hit deep within Russia. To date, this has happened on many occasions, and no nuclear action has been taken. Until the Kremlin responds to these hits, it will continue to raise more questions. Or perhaps Russia simply doesn't care, especially with peace negotiations currently taking place in Saudi Arabia. However, it is doubtful that with such a limited stock of rockets for the HIMARS, Ukraine would simply waste these without good intelligence. But wait, Trump also banned the sharing of U.S. intelligence to Ukraine. This means that either European intelligence or internal Ukrainian sources were used before these strikes. One such example is the presence of an actual drone which filmed the entire strike. Having such clear evidence, explicitly showing the aircraft being hit, is almost impossible to deny, even if you are the Kremlin. Moreover, a bit of common sense could provide a little more clarity to this situation. Since the airfield where these helicopters were hit is supposedly hidden and riddled with camouflage, it begs the question, why would Russia store broken equipment in a hidden facility? This is like the United States using Area 51 to store its damaged military equipment. The far more realistic probability is that these aircraft were fully operational and perhaps on the way to strike Ukrainian soldiers just across the border. They were likely spotted by the drone, and a HIMARS strike was coordinated to take them down. If this is the case, we should ask the question of whether U.S. intelligence is needed. If Ukraine can detect the airfield and down the aircraft without the assistance of the United States, it renders President Trump's threats somewhat idle. Perhaps Russia should realize that they can no longer hide anything. The entire situation is devastating for President Putin, especially with the current situation in Kharkiv. As many experts suggest, Russia would have liked to use bases and hidden airfields in Belgorod to assist the northeastern front. After this move, it remains speculative whether Russia will still try this tactic. In fact, Belgorod is becoming weaker and weaker by the day, perhaps creating another opportunity for a Ukrainian counteroffensive. In August 2024, Ukraine launched a surprise attack in the Kursk region. A few days later, Kyiv controlled roughly 450 square miles of territory. Yes, Russia is slowly regaining a foothold in Kursk, but it is tedious. Even the introduction of North Korean troops didn't work the way Putin had expected. Subsequently, troops and equipment were diverted from Belgorod, seriously weakening the area. By March 18th, news broke on Russian media, suggesting that Ukraine had entered Belgorod. About 200 troops and 5 tanks were reported across media outlets in Moscow. The aim of this mission is to disrupt supply lines from Belgorod by gaining a foothold in villages just south of the Kursk region. While no information can confirm how effective this move was, it will seriously disrupt Russian lines, further creating obstacles in reclaiming Kursk. Ultimately, this entire situation is a bit of a problem for Putin. If he weakens Belgorod, it will become vulnerable. However, keeping the area means slow progress in Kursk. With negotiations heating up, this could harm Russia's position in keeping all the territory it has gained since the start of the war. Putin might need to withdraw troops from other areas along the battlefield, but each mile of territory lost gives Ukraine more reason to either continue the war or use leverage in negotiations. As of this video, Europe is still firmly convinced that Ukraine will need to have all its territory restored to pre-war boundaries, and this single strike could open the door for it possibly happening. Whatever happens, Ukraine will celebrate this minor victory. The Kremlin is scrambling for answers, and the world is waiting. Thank you for watching this video, and please leave us a like and subscribe for your daily military report.